Welcome to the Scrum Show. Discussions with technologists and Agile software professionals on the Scrum Show are sponsored by Sonic Agile, a tool for Scrum project management. Learn more at www.sonicagile.com.
Hello, I'm here with Andy Hunt, best-selling author and a consultant a programmer turned consultant, one of the founding members of the Open Agile Alliance. And Andy, would you like to say a few words about what makes your workshops unique?
Well, I think everyone's unique in their own way, right? I try to take an approach that looks beyond just the sort of here's the practices that you do, or here's the theory behind computer science, or all that sort of stuff, and really get into more kind of the cognitive processing behind it, how our brains work, how we actually work and approach and deal with the creative art that is creating software and creating working systems.
Terrific. I think that is a really important thing that people who are outside of software often miss. Obviously, people who are inside of software know how creative a process it is, but I think sometimes people who don't do software, don't really understand how much research and putting pieces together and creativity goes into developing.
Absolutely, and how much learning goes into it. I've often said the two things that software developers do more than any other are communicating and learning. We learn all the time. It's a continual learning process. We're learning from the very system that we're building. We're learning from the users. So it's very much a cycle of try, fail, learn, try again, fail, learn. That's really the crux of a healthy organization and a healthy project team. And unfortunately, a lot of folks don't really see it that way. They think that you should be Mozart and sit down and whip out some completed wonderful thing right out of the gate. And creativity doesn't work that way. Mozart didn't work that way. The Beatles didn't work that way. Software doesn't work that way. That's just not how it is. It is very much an iterative process, and there's a lot of learning going on in that process.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have with me here a copy of your book, Pragmatic Thinking and Learning. It's in front of my face, so I hope it's in front of the camera there. And this book is a really interesting book because it, for those people who are interested in agile development processes, it is it's like takes you beyond just sort of things that you would do, for example, to do Scrum or to do some other kind of method, and it actually in some cases addresses some of the things that have to do with our culture and the way that culture is changing to become more agile. In the book you give an example of nursing teams becoming more agile, and kind of compare that with what's happening in software now. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Certainly. Excuse me. It was interesting. There's a great book out there called From Novice to Expert, which looks at skill acquisition and a lot of the same sort of issues that we have in software development about acquiring skill, working with users, knowing when to use judgment, when not to use judgment and fall back on, best practices, if you will, for lack of a better word. The interesting thing is, a particular book was written about the nursing profession back in the 70s and 80s. But a lot of the problems they came across and a lot of the issues they had to face were exactly the same for software development. So I drew a lot from the lessons of that book and said, okay, here's how we can apply this into a more pragmatic way of developing software and a more agile way of developing software. And a lot of it has to do with exactly that, with what you would consider to be the softer skills. Looking at how do people learn, how do you do skill acquisition and transfer, how do you work with culture, what happens when the culture is against you, all that sort of thing. And it's really interesting to see some of, I think, the forgotten lessons of Agile that have happened. As you know, a bunch of us got together and wrote the Agile Manifesto 11 years ago now. It was February of 2001. And I think a couple real key points kind of got lost along the way. One of the biggest ones was the fact that we expected that Agile would keep reinventing itself, that there'd be an explosion of new methods, new practices, things people do to help solve some of these very common problems. And we really haven't seen that. There was one of the foundational thoughts that went into Agile at the time was the idea of reducing risk. Software development remains a very risky endeavor. So one of the big things you can do to mitigate that is just transparency. Having everything out in the open, transparent team, the work that you're doing, the process. You don't want any place where bugs can hide, or misunderstandings can hide, or mistakes can hide and breed. And that's, from a cultural point of view, that's kind of hard to actually actualize that, because obviously if you're making mistakes and being called on it pretty much immediately, that's going to lead to some bruised egos. But everyone has to get used to that idea that it's okay to make mistakes. We all do. I probably make more mistakes before breakfast, than most people might make in a month. And that's all right. But some large companies, especially, you don't dare do that. That can be a career-limiting move. You don't dare make mistakes because of the corporate culture. And that just absolutely has to change so that you can have this sort of continuous try, fail, learn sort of cycle. And for a big example, look at something like Apple or Google, right? They've had tons of failures. Apple just announced a few days ago, before the iPhone 5, they're pulling the plug on Ping, their social network. They've killed MobileMe, they killed iDisk. They've had a lot of big initiatives that they experimented with, tried, realized, okay, we did it wrong, or that's not what people needed. It was wrong, and we tried it, the failure, now we pull the plug on it. So it sounds kind of strange, but in order to reduce the risk of large-scale failures, you have to be willing to have lots of small failures, and you need to have your corporate culture support that. Another way too. Just one quick example here. Last month, I was dealing with a really large, Fortune top 20 company, and their travel rules and restrictions, corporate-wide, were so onerous that programmers, and a result of that was programmers never get to interact with end users. They just couldn't do it because the bureaucracy was so difficult. So the programmers and project team leaders and managers had to work through multiple levels of proxies to find out what users actually needed for their software. And it's not working for them. It creates places for bugs to hide, and they're not going to actually fulfill what the users really need.
Well, we talked about using, when I say we, I mean, in the book, I part of what I was interested in, and that you're kind of getting at here, is the importance of, I call it retrospective, but people being able to give feedback, and it's sometimes giving feedback in the form of a retrospective can be a career-limiting move, or at least people are afraid that it could be a career-limiting move. So, as a consultant, how would you work with a team to make it safe for a team to give feedback about what's working and what's not working, so that they can start to make changes?
Well, that's a really big issue, and that's definitely a real problem that people run into. First off, a lot of the time, I find it seems that teams think about a retrospective kind of too late. They sort of tack it on almost as an afterthought, and might even term it a post-mortem, which is clearly far too late because it's dead. What are you going to do? What are you going to learn from that? How are you going to fix from it? So retrospectives need to happen very regularly. One of the big things of Agile is not to have any event in the project that is a big, hairy deal. You don't want a big testing phase. You don't want a big design up front phase. You don't want a big retrospective. You want lots of small bites, something you do a lot of the time in a small way. And that helps it, keep things from piling up, being too big for you to deal with. So you need to have retrospectives regularly. They should be smaller affairs because you're doing them each iteration. If you've got a really troublesome environment, a lot of problems, maybe this is something you do daily, every 2 days, You know, there's no crime in doing it regularly. But having said that, you need to actually build time into the schedule for the thinking that requires and for conducting a proper retrospective. Now, this is a little bit tricky, too, because too many people, I think, take the idea of, okay, so a retrospective, we're just going to throw everyone all together in one room and say, hey, how's it going? And that's all the thinking they put behind it. And it's actually a lot more to it than that. It's a lot more deeper than that. That's a very naive approach to doing a retrospective. So I would recommend to everyone, you know, go buy a good book on the topic. We publish one. There's others. Hire a consultant. Hire a coach. It is more like a form of group therapy than anything else. So you need to have some skills beyond asking how's it going to be able to get honest answers, to be able to make folks feel comfortable in divulging the things that they do know, but even more importantly, being able to divine the things that the participants may not even be aware of at a conscious level. There is quite a bit of skill to this. There's some popular tricks. You know, that there's we've got a book that's got the sort of typical consultant tricks, things you can do with dot votes and whiteboards and sticky notes and group activities to help get this kind of information out of the team in a safe manner, so nobody feels overwhelmed, feels threatened, feels their job's on the line. But you need to get that information out so that you know what's going on in the team, so you have some prayer of taking that feedback and addressing it. Because that ultimately is the big thing, one of the big things that makes Agile successful, is this continuous ability to get feedback and act on it. Credit, and you actually have to be able to act on it. If you get the feedback and make no changes, you're dead. You know, you might as well not even have bothered.
You know, speaking about not being defensive when you're getting feedback, I saw on your blog you wrote an article about Tina Fey's book, where she's talking about something that in improv theater they call the yes and game. And the beauty of the yes and game is that no matter what somebody throws at you, you are response able. So it allows people to not have to go to defensiveness and to be able to keep the conversation going. So given that our teams are going to be made up of extroverts and introverts, some of whom would just rather, you know, pull out their teeth and play the yes and game, but still it's that skill set of being able to just take the feedback and keep moving. Do you have any tip for, you know, just like the one little tip you can give us for working with a team when what somebody is noticing is that when individuals receive feedback, they just either shut down or worse, you know, can become a kind of a fight or something like that, or people shut down. So any tip for how to keep people response able when they're receiving feedback about their individual performance from team members?
Well, again, I think it really depends on, and this sounds like a kind of weenie consultant answer, but it really depends on the goal. If you look at like the modern startup, where it's just a couple of folks and they have a really crystal clear, single, well-articulated goal, they're going to be able to see past their own egos, their own career advancement issues, these sorts of problems, because if they don't get the product out next week in front of the bloggers, have it on Twitter, that kind of thing, they're dead, the whole game's over. So your ego takes a back seat to that. It's a very focused, you know, this is a survival game here. You have to concentrate on the goal. You have to make the product out there the absolute best you can, and you have to do it now. That's a really phenomenal environment for helping people get their priorities straight and sort out, you know, this is actually what we're here for. We're here to put value into this product. Now, in a larger organization, of course, it's not that simple. You've got a much more complex culture. Ego makes a bigger difference. Career advancement makes a difference. And that's a much larger problem. So, you know, a lot of folks say, well, restructure your big company so it acts like a bunch of little startups to try to get that sort of laser sharp focus on this is what we're trying to do. And I think on a larger note, it's important to think that, you know, the idea of agility, the idea of being agile, is that Agile by itself can't fix stupid. It can't supply motivation. It can't herd cats. It can't fix political posturing or create a product with a stupid, crazy, unrealistic timeline. What Agile can do is it exists to help intelligent, motivated people work together effectively to create value. So that's kind of the sweet spot. It is the lubricant to get some dedicated, smart folks on the same page, moving forward and creating something. That's where we're coming from with Agile. Now, back to your question, of course, that's a lot easier said than done. It can be very hard if you're in an organization whose culture just doesn't allow you to do that sort of thing. In which case, this is the right thing for you. If you're in a ginormous bureaucratic organization and you can't give or get feedback without all these other concerns, maybe that's not the way to go. Maybe you should, as Martin Fowler was famous as saying, if you can't change your organization, change your organization.
Well, thank you so much, Andy, for taking time to talk with me today. I've learned a lot from pragmatic thinking and learning, and I look forward to catching up with you in the future.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to The Scrum Show. This discussion was brought to you by Sonic Agile, a tool for Scrum project management. Learn more at www.sonicagile.com.